I've had strange things happen to me for most of my life. Unexplainable things. But the strangest things happened at my last home. We built our home on a property that had a suicide committed on it. We often heard loud bangs and crashes that had no explanation. The doorbell would ring, and no one would be there. We had 40 acres, and it would have been impossible for anyone to be playing jokes on us. Water faucets would turn off and on, off and on. Strong cologne smells that would wake me in the middle of the night. My husband would still be at work, and no, I wasn't having an affair. People talking and laughing in our bedroom, only we couldn't see them. Light switches turning off by themselves. Loud heavy footsteps coming into my room, stopping and then leaving. Plants and lamps being turned upside down. My mother and her dog would come for a visit. Mom would feel a real presence in her room, and the dog would stand at the foot of the stairs, barking madly. I left the home 5 years ago, and it doesn't seem like whatever was there followed. I think my house is haunted. I was really terrified at one point, but after a year, I got so used to it. But for example, me and my boyfriend have heard footsteps up and down the hall outside our bedroom. Sometimes it sounds like someone is checking the doors and windows. And one night, me and my boyfriend had a fight, and I went to go stay at a friend's house. When my boyfriend came home, he sat on the sofa and started dozing off, when all of a sudden, there was a series of loud banging up and down the hall like someone was angry. He jumped up and came out the door and came to my boyfriend's to ask me to come home. Another strange time, my boyfriend came home for a few hours to take a nap. He called me at work. I was about 45 minutes away. We talked for a few minutes. After we hung up, he went into the bedroom to lay down when all of a sudden, again, it sounded like someone was putting dishes away and moving around. So my boyfriend says he thought to himself, oh, Ivy's home. After about a minute, he realized that it could have not been me because he just got off the phone with me and I was 45 minutes away. A lot of unexplained things have happened. Sometimes, when we've been in the house alone and sworn that we're not alone, even when we are alone, it feels like someone is watching us. We've been together in the house and feel like we are being watched. I don't feel afraid anymore, but now we are moving out of this apartment, and it may sound even stranger, but you can almost feel a sad feeling, like whatever it is with us knows we're going and is sad. But I find myself feeling sad too. I don't think I need any help now, but I sure wish the help would have been there in 1974. We didn't know where to turn at the time. I thought you might be interested in what happened to us. The couple who rented the apartment to my daughter were 80 years old plus. We told them about the lights going out at different times, and they couldn't figure it out, so we never told them anything else. One time, my 2 daughters and my 2-year-old grandson were sitting on the floor, and way back in the kitchen, they suddenly started to hear a strange sound, and my grandson said, "Tiger, mommy, tiger." It was a growling sound. My grandson was scared and jumped up and made a beeline for the stairs. Then my daughters also jumped up, and they left the house for the night. Every other day or so, they would hear pots and pans filling out the cupboards, but when they would go look, nothing was out of order. It was a very nice apartment, very clean and pleasant looking. It was getting close to Christmas, and she decided to move. She couldn't take it anymore. It was just too scary. So I would go over in the daytime, and thinking nothing scary would happen in daylight, I went over to pack some things up while she was at class. I started to grab some things off the shelf, but I had a funny feeling that I didn't want to reach in the closet. All of a sudden, it sounded like 100 footsteps in there walking. So I ran out of there in a quick second as I could and refused to go back there by myself. From then on, we could go over at least 2 of us at a time. Then one of the last times I went over, I was standing, waiting for my grandson to finish in the bathroom, and as I was afraid to stand with my back to the hall for some reason, I kept thinking someone was going to touch me. Sure enough, I turned to ask my grandson if he had finished yet, and it felt like someone's hand had touched me on my left arm. I grabbed my grandson and ran to the front room with my family and told them what happened. So after that, we pretty much stayed together and worked together to move out of there. A friend of my daughter's knew the couple who had lived in that apartment before her, and they got in touch with the woman and told her what happened there. She wanted to meet with my daughter because she had some scary things happen to her. Her husband had drowned in the Maumee River in Toledo, Ohio, under suspicious circumstances. The police were never able to prove it, but he thought he might have been murdered. So his wife had a seance in the apartment where they lived, and she said she brought him there, and he told her he was murdered. She had a big insurance on him that he had taken out on himself, and when she went home from work at night, her house would be all messed up with things tossed all around. She had to move away but couldn't take it. Over these past 24 years, we've had some strange things happen, spiritual things and such. Seems to have settled down now, but I thought you would be interested to hear our story, and all that I've told you is true. There are no lies here. Let me know what you think. It's comforting to have someone tell this stuff to. A lot of people think you're nuts when you mention these things, so we pretty much keep it to ourselves. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about these things. Hi, I would like to tell you of some strange things that have happened to me. It started with a dream that would not leave me alone. It was about a house that was important to me for some reason. I dreamt of it over and over, seeing all of its different owners as they moved in and changed the house's layout, parties they had every day, things that were done there, etc. One early owner was an older female that did not like being there. I wondered about this house for years until I moved to my recent address and ran across the house on a drive. I was angry because they had moved my garden and replaced it with a pool. I was surprised by this feeling. Why did I feel angry about that? I decided to talk with the recent owners and tell them of the remodeling I'd seen and about the baby that was lost in the home early on. The owner was astonished that everything I said was true and explained to me the house was haunted. I was surprised at this and wondered who was haunting this place. Could it have been me? Was I haunting them while I was dreaming? Can this even happen? Why was I drawn to this house? I assure you, I never visited this house in real time and am in awe as to what this secret house holds for me. Could I be the woman who died in childbirth in this house over 100 years ago? Also, the woman who I spoke of earlier who did not want me in the house, she turned out to be the original owner's second wife. The first died in childbirth. Please write back with any insight you may have on this subject. I've not dreamt of the house since finding it. Thank you. I've experienced hauntings in almost every place I've ever lived in. That's probably because my mother never sees ghosts, but loves old-fashioned houses. The first house I grew up in was a single-level 2-bedroom with a basement. When you passed inside the front door, you came upon a hallway with 4 doors. First my parents' bedroom door, then the bathroom door, then the basement door, then the door to the bedroom that I shared with my brother. When I was little, I was always the first one awake. I would walk into the hallway to go to the bathroom. Once, I saw a carved wooden chair with big wheels, one on each side, sitting right outside my parents' bedroom. Normally, I would have lost no time in climbing all over this new piece of furniture, but this one, for no apparent reason, made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I ran back into my room and slammed the door. Later that day, I asked my father to please get rid of the big wooden chair in the hallway. Thinking I was playing a game, he said there weren't any chairs in the hallway, but if he ever saw one, he'd be sure to move it. I didn't see the chair again for almost 6 years. When I saw it the next time, I was sitting in the exact same place as before. I was older now and wasn't quite so afraid, so I came closer. The chair was battered and scarred this time. Part of the back corner had been broken off, and the seat was yellowed. It smelled like very old, musty leather. I still couldn't bring myself to actually touch the chair, but I managed to go to the bathroom anyway. While I was brushing my teeth, I heard a metallic crush in the basement. I figured my dad was downstairs trying to fix the furnace again. It was October after all, but that was odd, since I hadn't heard him go down there, but maybe he was up there before me. When I came back out, the chair was gone. I went to the fridge and poured myself some juice. My mother came into the kitchen in her nightrobe, and I asked her if Dad had gotten the furnace fixed yet. She said no, but he'd probably try once again. He got out of bed. I said he's already up. I heard him in the basement. She told me, "You mean that loud noise?" I heard it too. It woke me up. "Your dad's still in bed. Go downstairs. Maybe a stray got into the basement last night." And so, I went. The basement was very cold, colder than usual, even for an October morning. I searched the entire area. Not too difficult since it was just a big, concrete floor. Not much on it except for shelves of canned goods. But I didn't find any signs of an animal being there. No droppings, claw marks, paw prints, or jars of food broken. There was no animal smell either. I thought for a moment. The crash I heard was too loud to be just any animal, unless something had been knocked over, and everything appeared to be in its usual place. That wasn't the first time we had heard strange noises coming from the basement either. They normally happened around winter or late fall, and the noises always sound like metal clanking, like someone banging a shovel against a wall. The sounds would come at night or early morning, and one week, they got so bad that we had to move into the living room just to get some sleep. I didn't put two and two together until many years later, when I was a teenager. Mother finally told me a story of how they bought the house. It had been cheap to buy because a man had fallen to his death down the basement stairs a few years prior to Dad buying the place. The man was fairly wealthy and had the house built, 1 story high, to accommodate his special needs because he was in a wheelchair. I told my mother about the chair I'd seen in the hallway twice before. Chair with wheels. I was too little to have seen a wheelchair, and she told me what our next door neighbor had told her, that when the man had died, he was sitting in the hallway while the nurse ran a bathroom and the basement door opened, or had been left opened, who knows. The man was a miser, according to neighbors, and probably didn't want a draft coming into the house, so he wheeled himself over to shut the door. One of the wheels accidentally went over the edge, somehow, and the poor guy fell down the stairs and split his head open. There were still bloodstains at the bottom of the stairway. My brother and I always just assumed it was just red old paint. The nurse called out for him to come and take his bath, and heard him flailing around downstairs, trying to get back into his chair. Mom and Dad never told me or my brother. I guess they didn't want us to grow up nervous or jittery. The ghost, if that's what it was never really mean. I guess he just wanted his wheelchair back. I live in Spartansburg, South Carolina. I live fairly close to the Cowpens battlefield area. I'm going to tell you about one of the times I went there. A couple of weeks ago, I visited the battlefield for a picnic. It was weird from the start because, I swear, I could no longer find the visitor center. The asphalt roads had been replaced with dirt roads. In the clearing, where concerts are held, was all covered with trees and bushes. When I finally found my way to the area where the big cavalry battle was fought, I began to feel an eerie presence like I was being watched. I turned around to find a bush shaking furiously. From the bush, a big flash quickly followed by the sound of a loud bang erupted. I quickly turned to see who or what was shooting at. In the clearing, a good 50 yards away, a blue cavalry rider, surely American, stood with a traditional 17th century revolutionary uniform on, and before my eyes, he vanished into thin air. I've not been back since. The story I'm about to relay was told to me by a very reliable friend during my years in college. I had no reason to question the authenticity of his story, since I knew him to be a very level-headed man and was not given to ghost and goblin stories. It appears that his grandfather lived in an old home out in the lonely countryside of North Carolina during the 30s and 40s. He was a farmer by trade and a very religious man. He lived there some years alone, his wife having died of an unusual sickness. I had occasion to visit the area myself, and if you go to this area of North Carolina today, you will still find many cousins and aunts and uncles living very near one another. It was the same way during his grandfather's time where he lived there, very near to his son, my friend's father. In fact, the homes were only 2 miles apart and connected via a dark path that wound through a gloomy forest through which the relative often traveled on visits back and forth. It was always the goal to leave well before sunset. Lamp oil was a precious commodity before and during the war years, and one could not waste it on long trips in the dark. On this particular occasion, my friend's grandfather went to visit the relatives on the other side of the forest. It was Thanksgiving time, and the trees had shed most of their leaves going into winter, and there was a cold chill in the air. The family had a joyous time together, feasting on turkey and all the trimmings. Grandfather was deeply engrossed in all the family time, and no one noticed the sun starting to dip low in the horizon. In fact, too low for the safe journey back through the forest. Even though the members of the family pleaded with him to stay the night, Grandfather shrugged them off. "I have to start out early tomorrow morning for town. My house is closer. I'll be all right." He departed just as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, and everything was bathed in the misty light of twilight. As I said before, Grandfather was a very religious man and wasn't in the least bit intimidated by ghosts and ghouls, so the trek back through the forest, although very dark without a lamp, didn't even cross his mind as being risky. It was a waning moon that evening and cloudy, so there was very little light, and under the eaves of the forest it was even darker. He told his grandson later that even though he knew the trail well, he found himself thrashing around in the underbush on several occasions. He even miscalculated the stream that crossed the path around halfway through the forest and got his feet soaking wet. It had rained through the night before, so the trail itself was muddy and his feet started getting heavy from the mud. It was at about this point in the trail that he felt something, as if something were following him. Never having been on the trail after dark, he explained it away as his imagination. Perhaps another 50 yards down the dark trail, as he recalled, he heard something behind him splash through the creek he had just crossed only moments before. I didn't know what to think of that. Maybe a deer or something that was just spooked down the trail by his passing, he later told his grandson. It sounded like he was in a big hurry, whatever it was. Perhaps it was the uncertainty derived from the extreme darkness. Maybe it was his imagination. But when he heard a twig snap no more than 20 yards behind him only seconds later, he knew it was time to make tracks. His grandfather was in his early 40s at the time and was in excellent physical condition, like many farmers from the years of working with their hands. From his estimation, he was only a half mile from home when he started running, more of a jog than anything, as he recalled. The mud made it tricky work, and his feet were pretty heavy with the thickness of mud clinging to them. But when he broke from the trees and saw the shadow of the house around 100 yards away, he heard whatever it was behind him give out a guttural growl, as if it were exerting itself by pouring on the stream for the final stretch. That was his cue to let loose with full-out run for his life, mud or no mud. He didn't look back, but he heard the beastly thing behind him chugging for air and crashing through the underbush as it too broke into the open. He then thought it might be a cougar or panther because of the snarl. He didn't turn around to find out. He made for the back door that was unlocked, and at full speed, dove through the door. The door crashed open at the force of his huge frame. He probably slammed it shut with his foot and quickly locked it. No sooner he had gotten to his feet and backed away from the door, perhaps 3-second time lapse, when something hit the door, the force of which shook the house. The center of the door bowed in, and he heard the hinges creak under the stress, but thankfully, as he was to recall later, it held solid. He quickly reached for his gun, and like many hardy folk of his era, leapt at the window just next to the door and aimed his shotgun out at nothing. There was nothing there. Immediately, he went around the house to make sure all the doors and windows were locked. Of course, they were all wide open, but nothing got in that he could find. It didn't rain that night, so the next morning, before he went to town, he went to check out the tracks of the great beast that chased him. To his surprise and dismay, he found none. Nothing to verify his story, that he didn't imagine it, only his word, which was significant since he grew up in an era where a man's word was totally his bond. He rarely told the story because he just figured it was a panther or maybe a bear. He did find it strange that between the time it took him to grab the shotgun and get to the window was less than a second and there was nothing there. He couldn't see anything racing off towards the forest in the decreasing light. What about footprints? Certainly, something that knocks down trees and crashes into doors with such force should leave tracks. To this day, it remains unexplained. From the time I was 4 until I was about 16, my grandparents lived in a house on Cloverdale Road that had a poltergeist in it. I lived with them for the first 4 years, then moved out with my mother, but even after we moved, I would spend weekends or holidays at my grandparents' house. The happenings were noticed by everyone in the family. My grandfather was the only one who never said anything was out of the ordinary. He's a staunch man of God and kept pictures of Jesus around, and he prayed daily to bless our house and everyone in it. The house had a sunroom that was added on the second floor. Over the front porch, this became my room. This wall between my bedroom and the master bedroom, where my mother's sleep, was brick and had 2 small windows on either side of the door. I had to walk through a room to get to the upstairs hall, where there was a door leading to the middle room. Always dark, because the only window was 2 feet from the house next door. In the back of the upstairs had a small kitchen over the top of the one on the first floor, and a bathroom at the very back over the top of my grandparents' room on the first floor. The downstairs had a living and dining room combination that was curtained off. The front room was a bedroom, the middle the dining room, and the stairs to the basement went down at the doorway to the kitchen. Beyond was my grandparents' room, as I mentioned. My grandparents, my mother, my aunts, and myself all lived there all at once. My aunts were teenagers and experimenting with the occult and spirit invocations. I really think this had to do a lot with everything. At their age, they could have understood the consequences of what they were asking. You could clearly hear the footsteps in the middle room, even during the day, and then find out later that my aunt wasn't home. So many things got moved around in Susan's middle room that she put a lock on her door, but it wasn't any of us. We heard walking, someone laying down heavily on the bed, drawers opening and closing, the closet opening and closing, not loud or frightening, just the normal noises Susan would make if she was there. Many times, when I was very young, I'd scamper up the stairs, convinced she was there, and wanting to play with her. When I got there, the door would be locked, and no one would answer me when I knocked. Once I even saw the light was on in her room. It was shining around the door. I called to her and tried to open it, but it went out and the noises stopped. My scalp would tingle with fear, and I'd run crying to my grandmother and tell what happened. Once, when I was about 5 or 6, I got up to the bathroom in the middle of the night. My room was awash with streetlight lamp, but my mother's, with no other windows, was very dark. I had to go slowly, even though I was dying to go into the bathroom, because I didn't want to crash into something and wake her up. When I got there, I was just flushing and was suddenly possessed, no pun intended, with the most abject horror for no apparent reason. I screamed and screamed and screamed. I ran all the way to the bathroom past my mother, who was struggling to get up, into my room and under my blankets. I was trembling and pale and shaking. It woke up the whole house, and it took me hours to calm down and sleep with the light on. I never knew what had set me off, just blind panic. Our pots and pans could be heard falling out of the cupboards, and when you go check, everything would be in place, except maybe one thing, and that would turn up days or weeks later. My mother saw a black shadow, about 2 to 3 feet high, at the foot of her bed when she'd wake up in the middle of the night. One day, it waited until she was awake, then slowly, deliberately came around the side of the bed and advanced towards her head. She prayed fervently while it just stayed there, then mysteriously it faded away, but it will always come back another night. She was the only one who saw anything. The rest of us just heard disturbances. I was playing with my toys one sunny day. In my room, I was about 7 at the time. I picked up a bunting bag, sort of like a baby sleeper, but like a gown sewed closed at the bottom instead of 2 legs, and also the ends of the sleeves are sewn closed, and it had a hood. It was made of flannel and had flowers on it. I loved putting my baby dolls in it. It fit like the ones that were about 12 inches high. I had a doll prepared to put in it, and reached for the flannel bag on the floor next to me. Then I shrieked and jumped up, flinging it away from me. I could feel like there was something, felt like a gardener snake or two, writhing inside of it and making a buzzing noise like the world's biggest housefly or bee. I stared at it in horror as it laid on the floor, and the writhing could be seen. Then, the noise died down, and as it did so, the shapes quit swirling and went flat. I was screaming for help. My mother and aunt came upstairs, and I told them what happened. I was sobbing so hard they could barely understand me. They picked it up, even though I screamed and begged them not to, and looked inside. There was nothing. The only way out, if something was in there, was through the neck hole, and it was lying face up a couple of feet from me, and I had not taken my eyes off it for anything. They searched the room and found nothing. They said I imagined it, and took me downstairs to have juice to drink. I swear I never played with it ever again. I put that thing in the bottom of a box and left a pile of heavy toys on top of it. The house still stands, and when we all left, none of those things ever followed us. I wonder what else happened there over the last 20 years. My father died in Las Vegas in 1993, the youngest of his 5 children. I was the first one to make it out to Vegas for his funeral. He was cremated. I got there on a Wednesday. Thursday morning, one of my mother's friends came over to our house with some soda and other things for us. I ran out of the house to help her unload her car. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father standing beside the house. He had his right hand on his hip and held his left hand in midair, as if he were going to take a pull off a cigarette. Ironic, because he died of lung cancer, or as if he wanted to wave at or beckon to me. It was only a few seconds, but a whole jumble of thoughts ran through my mind. He's going to say something to me. I don't want to hear it. So I looked away, and when I looked back, he was gone. I regret not stopping to hear what he wanted to say to me. My brother said he chose to say goodbye to me. This was the first time I've ever seen a ghost. I'm waiting to see my mother, who died in May 1998. A footnote: when I saw him, I noticed that my father was wearing his favorite khaki pants and gold and white striped shirt. That afternoon, I went to my father's office to work on the program for the memorial service. His boss gave me a picture of my father. In it, he was wearing that gold and white striped shirt. When I was growing up, I've had several experiences which led me to believe the house was haunted. The first, I was about 6 years old. I was laying in bed, just about to fall asleep, when I heard what I thought was laughing. I turned over to tell my sister to be quiet when I saw a black form floating beside my bed. My sister was sound asleep. This form had no legs that I could see. It did have a smile on what I call its face. The next encounter did not happen until I was 16. I was coming home late one night and came face to face with this thing. It was the same thing I saw when I was 6, only this time there was no smile. After an indiscernible amount of time, I ran to my room. I've had several encounters with this thing throughout my teen years and began calling it Paul. Don't ask me why, because I don't know myself. My sisters and brothers claim they have never saw it, but one brother says he has had haunting experiences, such as floating in his room. My mother says she knows the house was haunted, but she refused to give any examples. I know this thing was not harmful because nothing ever harmful ever happened. I also came to feel that this thing was protective of us because I never felt alone or afraid in the house when I was alone. Whenever something was going to happen, we were given warning signs such as popping noises on the stove that we found out had a gas leak and uneasy feelings using the garbage disposal that checked out to have a barbed wire that an electrician said could have caused a fire. This is my story. Hope it wasn't too long. I know it sounds incredibly terrifying just by the details I've given, but that black face was just so mysterious. But I didn't know what to think because I believed that he was actually trying to help me and protect us from anything possible. I guess at this point, it really doesn't matter what it looked like, as long as it was trying to help us, right? Thanks again for reading. I really appreciate you listening to this story, and I hope you have a good day. Hey, it's Phantom and I'm not feeling sick right now. I feel better now, so I'm going to sing along. You sing along and you get happy, 'cause I have a 30-minute upload and the stories are good. Woo, 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 woo. Demonetization. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, guys, it's so good to be healthy. It's so good to not have the flu. And it's so good that I can just not edit this out and just be myself and just know that you guys are going to understand that my crappy outros don't understand anything either. So, whatever that means. Thank you, guys. I mean, at this point, everyone knows I'm sick, so I might as well just cough virtually to you guys. And hopefully that you guys don't catch it, because, I don't know, you guys don't deserve any sickness either. But anyway, guys, no, I'm just really happy. Seriously, I got a video out. It's 30 minutes long, and I'm really proud of my performance because I really gave it my all, even though I don't even know if I should be doing this right now because I'm just recovering, like I said. But anyway, guys, please comment, like, and share your support by sharing this video. Obviously, I'm getting close to 10K, and that's one of the biggest goals I've ever had on YouTube, just getting to 10K, and it's a reality almost, so let's get us there, you know? Let's get a rocket ship and blast us off into space so we can know what's going to happen when I get to 10K. Well, yeah, okay, maybe I am still a little bit sick, but guys, seriously, I'm out of energy, guys. Love you guys. I'll talk to you in the next video. So good night, good morning, and I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully with a rocket ship, right? Just comment. Just let me know what you thought of these stories. Bye.